On today's episode, we thank Hillary Clinton for being a clown, talk about how if you don't get bread, you get dead, hear a pitch for a reality show where billionaire CEOs live on the salary of their lowest paid employee, and talk about how, allegedly, freedom doesn't work because, in short, humans are garbage. This is Cringe Posts. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast, the podcast that takes on those really, really bad takes that you see online in your feed and you just don't have time to deal with yourself. Just relax, listen in, hear us make fun of them, and tell why they are wrong. Say what's wrong with them and why they do not hold up in the court of reality. I am Donald.
And I'm Britt.
And we always start, of course, by highlighting our own past cringes, because really, we've all said cringy things. We've all posted on social media in ways that make us shudder today. And so we are going to look at our co-host Britt's posts. And this is from 2012. We have now two posts here, and they are both on the same day. So first, on November 26, 2012, we have Denny's is greater than the NU Caf food, which is the Northwest University cafeteria, where he and I both went to university, the cafeteria food. So Denny's is better than NU Caf food. And then we have a follow-up post, also from November 26 of 2012, that says, "Eat Denny's, pay the price."
And I still remember, pay the price I did.
What a great turnaround. What a great, like, instant, there's nothing wrong can happen here, and then in the instant retreat,
I think that
the bold declaration.
Yeah, I think that like the NU CAF, like it got, like most universities, I have a feeling like their food kind of gets hated on. But as I look back on it and I think about, like, man, like the food wasn't too bad and I could eat as much of it as I wanted and it was cooked for me. And now, after graduating from college and not having that, it's like, that sounds pretty nice. So there's a little bit of college student privilege in there as well. Thinking I'm going to go to Denny's and I want to eat the 246 menu. With inflation, I don't think it's 246 anymore. Yep. But man, those $2 quesadillas were really good going down. Not really good later though in the evening.
It's funny. I have to say, one of my proud moments is actually resisting, not all, but some of the cafeteria hate. I at the moment appreciate it because of the fact that you could just go in, and I mean, technically we had a number of scans that you purchased meals, but like I didn't usually go in for breakfast anyway, so I would have more meals, so I could kind of go in whenever I wanted. And eat and take advantage of that. But there were days that, the Denny's greater than NU Caf food did ring true. And here's the funny thing is, of course, I think you could probably have taken a burger from each, and if you just swapped them, we wouldn't really know the difference, but you'd still say the Denny's one was better because you're paying for it. That's
I mean, I was paying for the college food too. I just didn't know it at the time.
You're right. Well, that's another really funny thing, right? You kind of illustrating the fact that, like, when costs are hidden like that, you're not really going to take full advantage or be as appreciative of the thing. Kind of like what we see in healthcare markets, right? Where like you don't have to provide the best service or the best value. There's not that direct negotiation when you're not paying for something directly, even if you are ultimately paying for it.
Absolutely.
So kind of funny, but I wish past Britt well. I hope it wasn't too rough of a night for him.
I went to Denny's a few more times after that, so I don't think I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was the guy who went to Denny's with everyone, and then I would just wait and see if someone had food that they wanted to share.
That's a good strategy.
I wasn't gonna ask, but if someone wasn't gonna finish something, I'm like, hey, I'll take that off your hands.
Yeah, that's good.
Okie dokie. We'll move to our first cringe post of the episode, and this starts with, this alone is a great cringe post. We've got a follow-up one in a comment, but this starts with a tweet from Chelsea Clinton. The tweet reads, "Thank you, Mom, for being a clown with me for Halloween, supporting all other costume choices throughout the years and always cheering me on. Most of all, thank you for being such a wonderful grandma. Happy birthday, Hillary Clinton." And attached is a photo of a young Chelsea Clinton and Hillary Clinton, both dressed up as clowns. And while there is, I want to editorialize right now. Let's finish the post here. The second tweet, the actual cringe post, is from a reply that reads, "Happy birthday, Hillary. I admire you on so many levels. You are truly an inspiration for all women. For your birthday, I bought your book. I know you will do good deeds with the money."
I had to.
Oh, boy.
I was telling you before this, but I had to check to make sure this wasn't like someone being funny, because there's just too much. It's too easy. It's too easy of a cringe post. And unfortunately, I went and looked at this person's tweets, and man, they fully believe this. I have no reason to doubt their sincerity with this tweet.
Well, I mean, they're probably a Russian bot, right? I feel like that's the easy cop-out. No one can be this absurd. They must be a bot.
Maybe.
You know, the Chelsea Clinton post, I wasn't planning on making this an every episode thing, but I think this also falls under the moniker of accidentally based. Just in that first line, "Thank you, Mom, for being a clown with me."
It just had to be clown
accidentally
with
based
me,
there.
period. Is it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I'm gonna start first by looking at the Chelsea Clinton tweet. What makes me laugh about that, other than the obvious, like, "Thanks for being a clown with me," is supporting all other costume choices throughout the years. I feel like there's some backstory there or something that's alluding. It just sounds kind of funny to me, especially coming from someone who's not like the most progressive left, but on the left, where they're often very much into policing what kinds of costumes you can and can't wear, what is or isn't offensive.
Oh, see, I thought they were talking about
also,
the human costume they dress up in as lizards. That's what I was.
Right. Yeah. Well, that one's less convincing than some of the other ones.
True.
I would think. I'm not fully sold on that. But and then the other funny thing is that the Democratic Party is the party, or the left in general is the one that's had a lot of blackface Halloween costume scandals with Justin Trudeau, who's not part of the U.S. Democrat, but part of the broader left, as well as Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, who also had a blackface Halloween scandal. So it's just kind of funny to see supporting all the other costume choices throughout the years. Like, whoa, what are you saying there, Chelsea? You have a funny picture that you're trying to keep buried from the yearbooks? I don't know. That's all kind of cheap shot stuff. Nothing really to dissect other than just kind of a funny situation in my mind.
Yeah, I always find the Clintons so funny, especially Hillary, because like they make such a effort to make her appear genuine, And so someone was like, "Okay, Chelsea, like how do we make her appear genuine? What's most like her real nature?" I get a clown costume. Let's just do that. It's like, yeah, that's genuine. You remember that? It was back in the 2016 election when they had the spontaneous run out in the woods, taking a selfie with the mom and everything, and it's just like everyone ratioed it. It's like, no way, this is not real. Like, you're not a normal person. You don't just go run out in the woods and meet random people like that. Like, the Clintons are just like the definition of elitist snobs, and every effort they tried to do to make them seem more relatable just comes off as more elitism.
Everything in that 2016 race she did came off so insincere, from her trying to pour the beer at the distillery and just doing it totally wrong to her making that awful joke, which I still cannot get over, the I don't know who made Pokemon Go, but we need them to make Pokemon go to the polls.
Oh no!
That was
you
bad.
should have said that. I didn't know that one. That one is going to give me secondhand embarrassment.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
dude, it is my favorite clip, and like you can see people in the audience cringing at the time. Like, it's not even hard to see. It is really bad. And then of course there's the classic one that I retweet every year, which is "Happy birthday to this future president," which was probably the closest she got to being sincere, because she actually sincerely thought and felt that, right? All that aside, now if you're someone visiting and you've never heard of the Clintons, you know the kind of person she is. That being said, this tweet, "Happy birthday, Hillary. I admire you on so many levels, and like I know you'll do good deeds with the money." What does she think Hillary Clinton does? Like, I can't imagine that Hillary Clinton has done a charitable deed in her life, even when she was in school and needed volunteer credits for Honor Society or something.
It's so weird to me, man. This is kind of like on the level of when people talk about Obama and they're like, They're like, man, I'm so like longing for the day when the worst scandal that happened was Obama wore a tan suit. And it's like, were you living under a rock, for 8 years? Like, same with this thing. It's like, have you been living under a rock? Do you think this lady does good things with her money? Do you think that she is a good inspiration for all the women, especially the women, that her husband violated and that she threw under the bus when she was in office? It's like, I don't know about that, but it's such a weird thing that they assigned, of all people to assign virtue to, like, this is the most, like, obvious one to not do it to, this lizard person. Like, don't assign any virtue to her. It's you could Google and Wikipedia all of her misdeeds and awfulness, and it's all right there for you to read. Man, it's just, what a weird thing.
Well, to be fair, a lot of her misdeeds wasn't done with her own money. It was done with taxpayer money. So I'm sure she's done good things with her own money, right? I don't think she got us involved in and tried to overthrow Gaddafi with her own funds. So that's, something. It was just our public money.
True.
So I'm curious genuinely what this person think. Like, here's the thing. Like, let's say let's use an example. Like, I like Thomas Massey. I think he's probably a good, decent person. I think he supports policies that are generally favorable to human liberty, those kinds of things. If I were to buy a book that he wrote or something like that, I would do so on the merit of the book, and because maybe I do want to support him. But I wouldn't try to contrive you're gonna do great things with your money, you're gonna go do good deeds. Sure, he might. That's also not why I'm buying his book. It's because I want to support him in general, and he's probably a good person, and I like what he's doing in the Senate. But it's I'm not trying to buy this and be like, man, Thomas Massey's so great. When I give him this money, he's gonna do great things with it. It's like, if you're worried about the good deeds, don't put a middleman in charge. Donate it to the charity of your choice, or go start something yourself, or I don't know. I know you will do good deeds with the money. I'm going to wash my hands of having to pick a charity or even do the work myself. I'm going to give it to Hillary Clinton to do that for me.
Yeah, I had, because I didn't know she'd written a book as of late. The last book I remember her writing is the What Happened in 2017.
Yeah.
Funny title for a book. But the new book is called State of Terror, and it's a political mystery novel.
Wait, it's fiction?
I think it is, yeah. Based on her real experiences. And I don't know. I don't actually know. I'm trying to find out what this is all about.
Yeah, I was going to say State of Terror, the Hillary Clinton story, parentheses, fictional, trust me, it's really fictional. Yeah, maybe if we get enough listeners on the podcast, we'll have to do a live reading of this or something.
The premise,
that would be
I can't
fun.
tell if it's fiction or not. It sounds like her career, but they don't say it's they say political mystery novel. The premise is a novice U.S. Secretary of State joins the administration of her rival, a president inaugurated after 4 years of American leadership that shrank from the world stage. A series of terrorist attacks throws the global order into disarray, and the secretary is tasked with assembling a team to unravel the deadly conspiracy.
That sounds like Hillary Clinton is just seething and wants to write this fiction book, and it's just writing, and her political rival, Barack Shobama, all fictional characters.
It's like in The Office when Michael Scott makes the threat level midnight, and he's the hero in it, and he's just this ultimate powerful.
Everyone's names, yep. And then. Yeah, exactly. They catch the one typo, you ruin everything, Dwigged. Yeah. Because he didn't Control F change all the Dwights or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Regardless if this is real or fictional,
it's
terrible. It's a terrible premise.
It's funny because I've always found there's a fictional book about Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's they go around together solving mysteries, and it's written by someone else, right? It was right when the memes about Obama and Biden being buddy-buddy were really big, and this book came out about them going around solving crimes or mysteries or something like that. And I always thought a lot of people thought that, oh man, that's super funny and hilarious, and I get it, it is kind of a funny concept. It's also a little creepy when you're thinking about these people who are bombing people overseas and like, you know, issuing edicts on controlling your lives and your money and those kinds of things. Just kind of creeps overall. So like I could never really get into it, but this is just like another level because it's not like someone else wrote it based on cultural memes. It's like she's writing it herself. Like, hey, I can be in this too. I can engage. It's like, you know, when someone like is the butt of a joke and someone else really wants to be the butt of a joke and like tries to push themselves also, like, oh, I'm also getting dunked on. Like, oh, okay, man. just don't try to insert yourself in the conversation.
Yeah. I might have to grab this and we can get some excerpts from it because that could be a whole episode in of itself, I bet.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Wow. Well, unless you have
good.
anything else to say on the good deeds that she's going to do with her money, I think we'll move on.
Sounds good.
Okay. Our next tweet comes from James Ellers, who is verified, so we are outing him. And his tweet reads, "The idea of having to earn a living implies that, by default, you don't actually deserve to be alive." And what's funny about this one to me is that he just inserts the word deserve. And that to me is the key thing where he's using misdirection, where a lot of people might see this book, oh wow, that's deeper. No, the idea of having to earn a living implies that by default you don't actually live. Like, you don't actually live by just existing. And that is a true assertion, right? We don't just live by existing. You're not born and then self-sustaining and autonomous from the start. When you're a baby, you have to get taken care of. There has to be some work done to provide for you. To earn a living, it's done by someone else. Your parents have to feed and clothe you and those kinds of things. Otherwise, you do die. There's nothing about the word deserving in there, whether or not you deserve. The idea of having to earn a living, there's nothing about like what should or shouldn't be. It's just what is.
Yeah, and I think the key word here is default, right? Like, okay, let's take this at face value what he means. Like, let's say default, like you grab a person and you just drop them in the middle of a rainforest. By default, if that person doesn't move, if they do nothing, they're not going to be alive, right? They're going to starve to death. They're going to get eaten. They're going to freeze to death. You know, the elements are going to kill them. And that's what people mean by saying earn a living. Like, the human body must generate heat. It must have resources put into it that are absorbed and then, you know, built upon itself, because if you're not growing, you're literally wasting away. And this is like such a weirdly privileged idea that you could just sit like that just by sitting around, like you could stay alive. Like, I think through basically 99.9% of human history all over the world, like, people intuitively understand, and I think our next post is this too, but like, if you don't like work, if you don't like go out and till the field, if you don't go hunt food, if you don't go gather berries, like, you starve. And yeah, our modern sense of the world is like, hey, yeah, if you don't go into work and generate value, you know, if you don't go and do your accounting work for the firm that's providing services, or if you don't go in and, you know, man the counters or whatever, like, same premise, right? Like, it might be a little bit removed from the direct act of getting food, and thank God it is, right? Because that means that we're solving different problems other than like the really challenging ones where if you fail to solve the problem, you starve to death, right? And that's a good sign in society. But it also leads to really cringe takes like this because people are so removed from what it means to survive. I think I heard someone, maybe I read it, but basically, and maybe we've done it on this podcast, but basically it's like, hey, the question is not, you know, why is there poverty in the world? The question is, how is there anyone that's not in poverty? Because poverty is the default state. Not having things is the default state. And so by the fact that we have so much stuff, like, that is the question. We should ask ourselves, why is there abundance anywhere on the planet? And by asking that question, you inevitably get to the answer. And by getting to the answer, then you can start duplicating that answer all over the place.
Exactly, yeah. And so, you know, in tandem, the idea of the default and the idea of deserve is what's completely misplaced in this tweet. I think it's a really good example of someone, and I don't know if this is intentional, or I'm not familiar with James Ellers. I don't know how much he is trying to craft a message like someone like, I would say, Bernie Sanders does, where I think he's woefully misguided, but he's generating a lot of these thoughts himself from inspirations of other people and whatnot, but versus just regurgitating the things they hear from people like Bernie Sanders or whatever. I don't know where this guy lands on the spectrum. If he's actually like sort of generating these thoughts himself, like he's actually producing thought rather than just regurgitating, then I think he's doing so very deceptively, because he's changing that paradigm of what is by default, and then what deserves to be by default. And I think you and I, from our shared sort of worldview, would say that as a matter of deserving, it's kind of an interesting idea, in the idea that one, human life is inherently valuable, and so you do deserve life in some sense, and then on the other sense, we're also deeply flawed and deserve retribution for sins that we've committed or whatever. But the point being more that like what we deserve and what is are not the same things. And so what is default, what kind of state of reality we're in, is not necessarily the state of reality that you deserve. And so by setting one standard of what is by default and then saying what should be by deserving, you're really just like trying to flip the script without people noticing. And I think that's what makes this take sort of deceptive, I would say, when you're first reading it, like, oh, does he have a point? And it's like, no, he's just kind of playing tricky mind games with you.
Yep.
Either intentionally or not.
Both bad.
Yeah. Well, unless you have any more, I think our next cringe is going to sort of talk about similar themes. Yeah. So I think we'll move in, because this is sort of the natural evolution of the conversation here. Anyway, so we'll move to our next cringe post, which is an Instagram photo. And the photo is a picture of two Monopoly men in the center. And then on the far left, it shows someone on a sewing machine looking very tired, making what looks to be like a scarf, or maybe I don't know, like a linen or of some kind. And then on the far right, it shows a sort of bedraggled homeless man in a box. And the captions over each, it's sort of between the two Monopoly men, it says capitalism is voluntary. And then over the worker, it says get bread. And then over the homeless man, or get dead. And the caption reads, capitalism is violent by nature, and without the state forcing the working class into submission, it would cease to exist. There is nothing voluntary about capitalism. Well, I mean, it sounds to me, Britt, like in the previous cringe post, you just described get bread or get dead, so you must believe
I'm
this,
evil.
Right?
I'm one of those evil Monopoly men.
Yeah.
There's nothing
exactly.
voluntary about the free choice to work and make yourself better and survive. That's not voluntary. That's
right.
Coercion.
Well, it's like, well, it's where do these people think the coercion stops then? Like, let's grant them. I mean, I obviously disagree with this premise, but it's like, where does coercion stop then? Because then the only system you're ever dealing with is one that is coercive and non-voluntary. And then the only thing that you're ever going to do is be able to trade power brokers. And so for you to argue that the state needs to, I don't know, like artificially coerce people into doing certain things, all you're doing is then creating an upper class of people who have control over society versus the ones who don't. So even if you accepted this premise, to me, it's like, well, you haven't even made a compelling case as to why your use of coercion would be better than this use of coercion, where at least in this version of coercion, people get to choose how they want to engage in that capitalism, right? Like, you can argue that, oh man, the working class is suppressed by the big people, but also in this system, you're not locked in, and like people can move to the top. Now, you might argue there's coercion or whatever, and I think we should talk about why that's not the case. But even in their paradigm, even in what they describe, I don't think that they've made an argument saying why capitalism is inherently worse than any other coercive system. Because the only way that you can have a free system would be this, or total anarchy, which they would probably also say warlords or whatever. So I guess I don't see the work being done to say like why, if this is coercion, it's inherently worse coercion than any other coercive system, like socialism, like communism, whatever, what have you.
Yeah, and this is kind of the bummer about some of these lefties, is that they they accurately look at the current system we've got and they say there's something wrong here. Like something is not functioning properly. There's injustice. There is ill-gotten gains. People are gaining resources by lie, cheating, killing, and stealing. And then they assign capitalism to it. And it's like, oh, you were so close. Like you were so close to getting this right. All of the mechanisms that you don't like, that you are against, the big corporations leveraging, lobbyists and mandates to get their way and to monopolize, literally monopoly. The only way you can get a true monopoly is via government intervention and mandates. The very thing that you are against, the system you are proposing to replace it, is the reason it is there in the first place. And that's what's so ironic about it and so sad. And I wish, John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, has this book called, I can't remember, it's something capitalism.
Conscientious Capitalism?
Yep. And it's fantastic. And I was listening to him talk about it on Joe Rogan, and then I bought his book, and I've read a couple of the chapters. I still need to finish it. But basically, John Mackey's trying to say, look, the only way, yes, there's going to be human greed, there's going to be evil things, evil people under any system that you've got. But under capitalism, at least you have the ability to not be an evil person. At least you have the ability to make profit, to grow yourself and grow the world and make the world a better place for both you and your employees and your customers by providing value. And he's kind of has this critique of the right, and I think it's somewhat justified, that no, it's not like a corporation's only purpose is not to provide profits for its shareholders, right? It's to provide value. And that's a key distinction, right? Because value is not just profits. It's also, whatever societal thing you're doing. People find value in things that don't generate profit, right? I find value by volunteering for different things. My wife finds value in volunteering for different things, or by giving of our time to go help a friend, that we're not paid for, to go help remodel their house or do a project and stuff like that. And I think that he has a really good point, and I think that's one of the ways that we win these people over, right, is by demonstrating that, capitalism is the only ethical and voluntary way for good things to be done, right? You can, and for good things to continue to be done, because, sure, you could say, I'm going to come to your house with a gun and say, hey, give me 30% of your income, and I'm going to redistribute it to the poor, and maybe that's good for 1 second, and then after that, it's just awful and evil, right? Good things do not continue to be done under that method. So we want lasting change that actually provides good things for people and makes people better people. The government can't make people better people, and I don't think you can find anyone that would advocate for that. You've got to have free markets. You got to have voluntary exchange, because that's the only ethical way to do anything.
To hop on the John Mackey train real quick, I was really fortunate to see him just about a month ago in person. He came and spoke at our annual dinner event for the place I work for.
You didn't invite me.
I'm sorry. I should have let you know.
I got to go work for Washington Policy Center, man. That just sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. I was super interested in, he's describing his upbringing into business and stuff, and he's talking about how he'd lived in this sort of hippie commune, right? Because he's this lefty hippie, and he wants to start an organic food store with his now wife, then I think they were just living together, girlfriend, and she's totally into it, and they open up their store, and they start taking off, and he just doesn't know the first thing about business, and he's learning, and he's doing everything firsthand, right? And that's some of what we were talking about earlier, where it's when the further you're removed from providing food for yourself, the more you sort of lose perspective on these things. And so he's doing everything himself, and it's if they don't sell this stuff, then they're not going to eat for that day. And it's not because of capitalism, it's because of capitalism that he was able to provide for himself. He was working in a food store, and then decided I could do this, and so then he moves and opens his own. And he starts by, paying his workers very, very high rates and trying to charge very, very low, with this sort of lefty mentality that capitalism, the idea of profit, is all evil. And then he realizes that, he looks at his books and he's like, I cannot afford this. I'm paying my workers too much and charging too little for this to be sustainable. And yet he's still getting called a evil, greedy, profit-hungry capitalist from the left, even though he's paying much higher rates they're saying they're not paying his workers enough. And he's like, okay, so I either need to change my prices, or excuse me, I need to either change my politics, or I need to get or I'm going to go out of business. So that's kind of what woke him up to that. And so it's just kind of funny that like, you know, the left will attack that without being in perspective. And when they actually sort of get into the position where you're providing for people and providing for yourself and providing that value, you almost wake up a little bit more. And then to jump back to what you were talking about earlier, where they're so close on targeting the things that are wrong with the system, but then they blame capitalism and not the state. I mean, you see this in the text of this post where it says, without the state forcing the working class into submission, capitalism would cease to exist. There's nothing voluntary about it. Like, who are you kidding? Without the state forcing the working class into submission? I'm sorry. Last time I checked, all of the government edicts that are coming out there are not like pro-capitalism, anti-worker stuff. And you can argue that there are certain things that the government like allows workers to do, or excuse me, allows businesses to do that you know, stifle workers and whatnot. But I think you'd be hard pressed to say that the state is helping capitalism in any meaningful way. There's cronyism, there's corporatism, there's buying specific big business players, but that's not capitalism. That's not a free market.
Yeah.
The whole idea of free exchange is one without the state involved, without the state regulating it. So you remove the state forcing down the working class, and then you actually might get a much freer market. I totally agree. Have the regulations that keep workers down, like occupational licensing, removed. Let's have state prohibitions on zoning laws, or whatever you want. Like, get those out of there, and then we can have a much freer market, a much more active and responsive dialogue between prices, between workers, between consumers. All of that flows so much better when you don't burden it with these ridiculous regulations from government. It helps business owners, it helps workers, and it helps consumers to get that out of there. So don't say without the state pushing workers down, capitalism wouldn't exist. Without the state pushing workers down, you'd have much better, much freer markets and a way more voluntary cooperative society.
Yeah, that's kind of the inherent contradiction in their caption is that the state, capitalism wouldn't exist without the state forcing workers into submission. Well, capitalism with the state involved anywhere is not capitalism, and that just demonstrates their fundamental misunderstanding of how this all works and definitions.
Right, and it's like, okay, so then you get rid of capitalism, get rid of the state, weighing down workers, and then let's just get rid of the state right now. And then what do you have when everything is entirely voluntary? You have free market capitalism. That's when you remove the state. That is what you get. That's what naturally emerges, unless you set up a new state to enforce your own edicts and your own power, like what I was talking about at the start here. So just very circular logic there, where no, the state's the only thing that is enforcing capitalism. So you get rid of the state, and then capitalism goes away. But if capitalism goes away, that means that the state has to be there enforcing something else, because if the state's not there, capitalism emerges. It's just kind of chase your tail there. Okie dokie. Well, unless you've got anything else, we'll move to our next cringe post. All right. So this one reads, okay, hear me out. A reality show where billionaire CEOs have to live off their lowest paid employee's salary for a month.
When I saw this one, we did an episode a while back about what percentage of billionaires self-made their money and versus inherited it and all that. And okay, this doesn't necessarily apply to the 13% of billionaires that inherited it, right? All of their billions. But to the billionaires, the 40-ish or 50-ish% that self-made it, started a startup and made it, I can tell this person that those billionaires, while they make a lot more money than their lowest paid employees, at some point they have made $0 in their career, and they made $0 for more than 1 month. Having me personally being part of a startup right now that's having some success, I can tell you that for about a year and a half, I took $0 in salary from my company, and we just used savings that I'd worked for and saved up on from working a normal job to provide during that entire time. And there are many other companies, the average time it takes a company to turn a profit, forget about billionaires. Any sort of company, it takes about at least 3 years to generate a profit to where you can start taking a salary as a business owner. And so, yeah, that TV show already exists, right? Like, it's just not being filmed. That concept already exists. The lowest paid employee's salary is X amount of times higher than what the billionaire CEO when they started the company had when they were starting out.
The funny thing too is it's like the self-made billionaire. Again, there are exceptions, but I mean, I would hazard to say a majority of them, when given that, and obviously you have to take them away from their current lifestyle, because when you live in the whatever salary range you're in, you set up systems that cost you money, and oftentimes it's ways that you're sort of duplicating. But it's like, okay, let's take them away from all of their current obligations. Let's throw them in this TV show where they're living on their lowest paid employee salary for a month. You know what they'd probably do? They'd probably find ways to be very thrifty and very frugal and like use the money wisely, because they've built that skill set. I always think about the article where Bill Gates talked about how he still buys like blue jeans at Costco. At the time he's the richest man in the world, and he's just sort of like just in that habit where that's not, it's not what he spends his money. He's still trying to save. And it's like, yes, there are people who spend their money in ridiculous ways when they are that rich, and they're entitled to do that. And there are lavish things that they do, but it's often a product of them having access to those resources, and the ways that they got to that place often involved making wise and frugal choices. So, if it comes to them living that way for a month, I think a lot of them probably would do fairly well.
Yep.
Just as a concept of a show, it probably would not be that entertaining. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, we were just talking about John Mackey. I mean, I can't remember exactly what it was, but the guy takes a salary of $1 a year. And I don't think he even takes like equity from Whole Foods anymore. So he makes money purely off of figuring out how to generate other value other places. Not even from the company that he owns and runs. And I am sure some of that has to go from the optics. That's why he chose to do that, But it's a powerful testament, right? The guy's worth at least $100 million, right? And he's still able to kind of figure it out. And Jordan Peterson has this kind of interesting quote. He's like, yeah, if you took all of the money in the world and then you distribute it equally amongst everyone, he's like, you would quickly find that it would find itself back into the same people's hands pretty quickly in the same quantities. And I personally, throughout my life, I've seen that be the case as well. It's about decisions.
Right. Yeah. And exactly. Right. And I mean, that's why you look at people who win the lottery are usually back to where they were prior to that within 5 years, because they haven't earned it in a way that has made them responsible for it. It's also why people who inherit money, and are billionaires, often have managers of that money. Now again, I'm not like defending them and saying like they're the most noble people, whatever, but like they don't not deserve that, right? They inherit it from their family. Like, the people who earn that money do deserve to spend it where they will. And all that being said, the reason why it often stays in those is because people need to learn how to manage money and how to acquire it and those kinds of things. Most billionaire CEOs, who again are not the ones who are just sort of like sitting back and letting other people do the work, the ones who are self-made, which is again majority of them, they will have gone through these steps of knowing how to manage money and how to be responsible and how to generate value and how to retain value with what little they have. So
yeah, there's this is kind of my last bit on it, but I think it is the 8 generation principle, which is that family wealth is usually goes on an upward trend for 5 years, or not 5 years, but 5 generations. It's accumulated and it peaks at the 5th generation, tons of wealth inherited. And then by the time the 8th generation rolls around, so 3 generations later, it's basically all but lost. And I think that is a real true function, right? Of people that make fortunes are the ones that are usually best at keeping it and maintaining it, and the people that inherit or have not earned earned those fortunes generally are likely to lose it.
You almost could make an allusion to a democratic society, democratic republic that's founded on certain principles, and maybe when it's not being run by the people who founded it on those principles, maybe starts to decay a little bit. I don't know.
That's a good analogy.
All right, into the last cringe post, we have this person who's replying to a conversation from Dave Smith and the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. And we don't have the full thread here, but we don't really need to see that for these cringe posts. So the tweet replies are as follows. I don't agree with their policies. They are for a, quote, free world without the understanding of history. The free world they are talking about will lead to further income inequality, deterioration of our environment, assault on people's civil rights. Humans are garbage, basically. I would love a true free world, but there is too much oppression, greed, and evil in the world to rely on good faith of others to do the right thing. Agreed, it's a goal to work towards, but I don't see the feasibility in the next 50 to 100 years. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Humans are garbage, basically.
So let's elect a select few. Let's elect a select few to control everything, because they will make the right choice when it becomes a hard time.
Well, and I'm sure that the people who are attracted to the reins of power are definitely the cream of the crop, not the most garbage among us.
Yes. What's always so funny about these folks that kind of hate on or criticize the idea of liberty is that they're always inevitably describing the status quo, right? Like when this person says, what we're talking about when we want a free society is further income inequality. Okay, well, we've got that now. Check. Deterioration of our environment. Check. Assault on people's civil rights. Okay, well, we've locked people in their homes for the past year and a half. And it's like, that's what's so funny about it. It's like, okay, well, the worst case scenario of you choosing freedom is that we have lots of good things for a little bit, and then if it all goes bad, we just end up where we are right now. Like, that's your argument against having freedom? Like, it sounds like a pretty flimsy one.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and it's funny because you look at the you look at the causes, and I think in our very polarized and one narrative centric media, you'll get pushback on this. But when I look at these problems, and it's like, who are the biggest violators of each of these things? Like income inequality, well, probably the government, which bailed out the top earners rather than helping out the Americans. Probably the government, which shut down businesses across the entire country, and particularly businesses that often operate on low margins and are not able to be worked at remotely. So income inequality, I think I'll give that one to the government, not the free market. Deterioration of our environment. Now, this one's a little bit sketchier back and forth, but I think of examples like in the BP oil spill, where a guy developed a product that would have been able to absorb all the oil from the water. There's sort of these I can't remember what the material was. It was this kind of interesting material of these like orbs that you could throw into the water, and they would suck up all of the oil after you leave them for some time. But the regulatory bodies wouldn't let it be sold or used because it needed to go through the bureaucratic checks before it would go out there. And then I also think about the fact that the ways that you keep public parks and forests and all those and general land management that you want to preserve, the best way to preserve that is through private ownership, where there's an incentive to keep it alive, not this collective everyone owns it and so no one takes care of it mentality. So when I think about the deterioration of the environment, I also think about the government. And then assaults on people's civil rights. Well, come on. Like you said, you just kept people locked in their homes. We're trying to tell people who aren't vaccinated that they can't go into a freaking grocery store. Like, come on. That's obviously the government. And so it's like, yeah, there's too much oppression, greed, and evil in the world. Who's the perpetrator of that? It's the government, not the free world, you goofball.
Yeah, the line that always gets me is, there's too much evil, oppression, all that stuff, for us to rely on the good faith of others to do the right thing. And it's like, I agree with you. You were close to being, as you put it, accidentally based. I agree. Like, we can't have good faith to rely on people to do the right thing, so we should decentralize as much as possible so that people that do want to do the right thing are not being commanded by the people that, obviously don't want to do the right thing. And the funny thing about this, right, is even if, let's just say in some magical world we could elect all of the people in our current system of government, the thousands of people that occupy the various houses and legislator and the president and all this stuff, and they are all good people through and through, pure of heart. They're still not smart enough collectively to make the right decisions to lead to a good outcome. You could still have hell on earth with the best of intentions, and that's the even if they got what they wanted, right? You still don't end up with the result. The only way, like we've always talked about on this podcast, is the aggregate knowledge of the market, and that's the only way for resources to be allocated the way they're supposed to be allocated, and for ultimately good outcomes to result.
Totally. I mean, the idea of doing the right thing is so subjective to so many different kinds of people that he seems to be a little bit mistaken on the idea that, like, there is a right thing. Now, we might all individually think that there is a right or proper thing, but the fact of the matter is that, like, there's opportunity costs to everything. There's perspectives you don't have as an individual, and so for the idea that, like, there's too much oppression, greed, and evil to rely on the good faith of others to do the right thing. Well, if that's the case, how much more of a risk is it to entrust one person's interpretation of the right thing to control it all, or one group of people that we've seen continually, time and time again, are putting their own self-interests before anyone else's? I don't see how you look at a government that lied us into war, into invading Iraq by lying to the American people, by coming before Congress and saying that there was weapons of mass destruction, or that Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein were in cahoots. I don't see how you see that group of people and then think, yeah, you know what? I'd rather risk it with those people than everyone individually having control over their own lives and the people you interact with determining what's right or wrong. Like, my goodness. I mean, people praising Colin Powell for being more hesitant to go to war, and he was the one who admitted that he knew all of that was wrong and then lied before Congress anyway. That makes him all the more awful because he knew, quote unquote, what the right thing was and chose to do the wrong anyway. So, yeah, forgive me if I'm way more skeptical of one monolithic body of terrible people being in control to do the right thing than I am with everyone individually making these decisions for themselves, where even if someone chooses to do the wrong thing, it only impacts that individual surroundings, and there's everyone else there to correct it, versus a government edict, which, unless everyone collectively stands against, you're somewhat powerless to overcome.
This is sort of branching off topic, but you reminded me of it when you were talking about Colin Powell specifically, and how, his way of, like, kind of reclaiming his honor after the disastrous wars that he supported was trying to say, well, I knew they were bad, but I just didn't know how to speak out against it. Like, it reminds me of all, like, what's going, like, in 10, 20, whatever many years it's going to be, we're going to have a bunch of people that were involved in shutting down the country and all of this craziness, and they're going to come out and they're going to say, oh, we knew that this wasn't good, but we just didn't know how to stop it, and all this stuff. And there's this article I read this morning, and it was fantastic. It was about this lady who detailed her journey with her autistic son, and how basically, like, in the 80s and 90s, there's settled science about specific, all of the experts had said that this you need to do these types of therapies, and it's all about nature, and if your kid is autistic, it's because the mom is a bad parent, and refrigerator moms is what they were called. And so they treated the kid on this, and then in the 2000s the science switched, right, and for a variety of different reasons. So then they put this kid on a bunch of medicine, and he eventually ended up committing suicide, which was really tragic. And this lady writes this really well, and she's like, I'm seeing the same patterns here with this COVID thing, right? Like, the science is settled until it's not. And kind of tying it back to this tweet, like, the right thing when it comes from the government is settled until it's not. It's like 1984 when Winston is standing in the plaza and they say, no, we've always been at war at Oceana, like, and they changed the flags and who they're fighting against, and this other country has always been our ally, and, like, we really are seeing that play out in real time right now. And I think to be blind to that and to say that the world is going to be a worse place if people are more free and we need to now give ourselves over to these people that are able to change on the turn of a dime what their positions are and what the right thing is, and the turn of a dime usually results in millions of people being killed or impoverished. I just think is absurd. And what's crazy, and this speaks to our education system, is all these people just take it at face value without really thinking about it, right? Like I had to break myself of it. Like I was homeschooled, but like I still had like kind of some of the more typical history books. And I used to think, when you talk to me about this stuff, like, but man, like what would happen, And I remember like talking about like the roads, and like, oh, well, who would build infrastructure or manage these things? Or I used to describe myself as a minarchist. And as the joke goes, the only difference between a minarchist and an anarchist is 6 months. But I used to think, well, we need to have, police, or we need to have someone to like make everyone equal under the law. And it's like I realized, I was like, man, that's like I've just been told that my whole life, right? All the books and all the media and everything makes it seem like that is the norm, when in reality freedom is the norm, or should be, is the only ethical way.
Is it the default? Is it what we deserve? Just tie it back to our good friend Ellers. Well, unless you've got any other thoughts, I think that was very well put, and couldn't have said it better myself. So I think we're good. We will go ahead and end this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening in. Please make sure to leave a comment, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends and family, leave a review, do all that good stuff. Help us continue to grow. We are super appreciative of the growth we've had, and only want to keep going up from here. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you later.